Hello, is everyone with me? We will start now, I think. Sorry, Zoom booted me out of my own meeting just then. Can everyone hear me? So if you, in the chat box, if you just put a, if you hit like, if you can hear me okay, and cross the heart, or just thumbs up if you can hear me okay. Yes, perfect, great. Oh, thank you for joining me. So I'm Paul, I run Pass My English. It's predominantly for GCSE and A-level students, but it's for everybody who's keen on English literature and language. So today we're going to do a poetry analysis masterclass. It's going to be a mix of academic and not. So it's primarily focused for the GCSE and A-level exam, but if you're not doing either of those, then hopefully you'll still get something out of it. Just before we start, what is poetry? I didn't write a definition because I can't get any better than this. This is Carol Ann Duffy. She says, it's an ancient means of communication. A poem is like a shot of espresso. It's the fastest way to get a hit of mental and spiritual energy. The world's biggest, longest running workshop on how to love, conversation across time. Poetry is the acid scrub of cliche. We could say that poetry is a lie detector and pleasure. And that's the really important thing as well, is we can actually take pleasure out of poetry, even if we don't really understand it fully. And that's also what I want to get across today, is the ways in which poetry is enjoyable to us on a sort of human, visceral level, even if we don't academically engage with it. So first off, how do you understand and analyse a poem? Well, every poem that is ever written, ever, is about emotions and feeling. And that is one of the most important things to remember. In fact, it's the only thing you remember from today. Every poem is about emotions. So if you're writing an exam or an essay, even if the question doesn't explicitly mention emotions and feelings, how does the speaker feel about ... you can't neglect the emotions of the poem. You also don't have to understand it all. T.S. Eliot said, quite famously, you don't have to understand a poem to enjoy it. And we'll talk about that later, but you have to think about the sounds and the rhythm and the effect of the poem that has on you before you even start thinking. And that's also important, but we'll go on to the technical side of it later. So the three questions you need to ask, only three to understand any poem ever, is number one, what does the speaker feel? Number two, how do they express it? And number three, why do they feel that way? And we're going to go through now and figure out how to answer those three questions. But that's the basic question you just need to understand. So if you're in an exam, say, and you have just read the poem and you panic and think, I've got no idea what this poem means, go back to these three questions. If you ask yourself what the speaker is feeling at the time, that's a great starting point. So, number one, what does the speaker feel? First thing to do is we need to find the emotions in the poem. And to do that, we need to broaden your emotional vocabulary. And students that don't do so well in the exam, they might be actually brilliant at everything else in literature. They might be great at Shakespeare and modern poetry, modern text, but they fall down on the poetry because they don't necessarily know the right words to pinpoint exactly the feeling going on in the poem. It's not good enough to just say the speaker feels sad or angry. Think of those as your primary colours of the emotions. You need to get into the nuances of every feeling. And that's a skill. It's a bit like if you study music, if you play an instrument, if you listen to a piece of classical music particularly, it's identifying an instrument. You know, it's like, oh, that's a harp, that's a trumpet, that's a trombone. That's a skill in itself. You might be very good at that and take that skill for granted. But someone who doesn't play an instrument would find that very, very difficult. And then even if you do play an instrument, it's not just identifying the instrument itself, it's identifying the notes. And you need to be pitch perfect for that. That's a very, very acquired skill. And the same with poetry. It's a skill to identify the emotion going on. So we're going to do a quick exercise now. It's about 3 minutes. And if you've got a pen and paper handy, or if you just want to do it on your laptop, that's fine. I just want you to list as many emotions as you can think of. So try and go beyond those primary colours of angry, sad, happy. Try and get into the most particular emotion, all the nuances of emotions in 3 minutes, and we'll see how many you come up with. Okay, hopefully that's been enough time. Did anyone get more than 10? Click yes if you got more than 10. Yeah, oh great. Did anyone get more than 20? Great. 30? Wow, good work. Okay, just very quickly, because we've got so much to do, here's a little emotion bingo. See how many you got from here. So we've got exhilaration, glee, terror, dismay, contentment, infatuation, amazement, longing, uneasiness, compassion, relief, pride, adoration, desire, agitation, fury, spite, love a bit of spite, apprehension, disgust, exasperation, resentment, contempt, melancholy, guilt, and grief. And hopefully by seeing all of those different types of emotions, I mean, I'll put on later, I'll send you a load of resources, but if you can try and think of all of these before you go into an exam or as you're writing an essay, you can see how much more sophisticated your analysis of a poem is going to be if you can really pinpoint and say, this poem has a semantic field of melancholy and apprehension, or, you know, the speaker clearly feels agitation towards ... rather than just annoyance, or you really try and pinpoint. So when you're doing that practically, how do you do that? So I'd say try and read a poem more than 3 times when you see it. And the first time you read it, you might want to just read it through to just get a flavour of it. And on the first or second go, try and underline every word that transmits a feeling. So anyone that has a strong connotation of an emotion, underline it. And then once you've done that, write the emotion next to it, or just any thought that you get next to it. I'm going to give you an example in a minute. So can I just, if you go into your chat again, just so I know the sort of level everyone's at, can you hit like if you are GCSE? Just so I know how many people are doing GCSEs. Okay, and how many are doing A-level? Okay, so we've got a mix then. Yeah, year 13. Oh, hi, you and sister as well. That's nice. Okay, so in that case, I'll start with a GCSE one. So you might find it easy, but I think that's quite useful. So I'm going to go to my iPad. So if you, when you look at the participant list, if you can find Paul's iPad, and we're going to do exercise 1 on the mower, which is by Philip Larkin. And I'm just going to share my iPad. Okay, so can everyone see the poem now? Perfect, okay. Now I'm gonna try, and this might be a bit of a free-for-all, but I want to unmute everyone and then just shout out whatever emotion. This might be a complete free-for-all, and we might want to revert back to the chat. So going on the first line, are there any words that transmit, do you think, a strong emotion? Just come off mute if you want to say.
Stalled.
Stalled, yeah. And what emotion do you get from that, or what do you think?
It's very still.
Still. So that stalled means
Slowly.
it stops. Okay, yeah, good. So still, there's a stillness to it. Second line, a hedgehog jammed up against the blades. So for me, jammed up, because it's quite a strong image, it's quite horrible. You kind of imagine the hedgehog being mangled. It's quite grotesque. It's quite maybe disgusted slightly by that. Anything else? Or shock, perhaps, if you're feeling shocked by the image. Killed. Any particular emotions you're getting from that?
It's like initially violent.
Yeah, absolutely, violent. Absolutely. It'd been in the long grass. I had seen it before and even fed it once. Now I had mauled its unobtrusive world. What, does anyone have any thoughts about mauled and unobtrusive?
Mauled is like the excess violent.
Yeah, definitely, yeah.
Following from kill.
Yeah. And that's contrasted with unobtrusive. And what do you get from that? What's that? I'll just get the chat box open in case anyone's chatting. Mauled is quite graphic. Absolutely, yeah. It's a horrible image, isn't it? Remorse and grief, definitely, yeah. Next morning, I got up and it did not. The first day after a death, the new absence. Yeah, grief. Guilt, regret, absolutely, yeah. and guilt. Absolutely. It's always the same. We should be careful. I guess, yeah, we should be careful. That goes back to regret of each other. We should be kind while there is still time. Nostalgia. Yeah, definitely. Yeah, when you used to feed it. Where's that? Even fed it once. Yeah. Nostalgia. Emptiness, which is ironic because he didn't know it existed. Well, he did know it existed because he fed it once, but yeah, maybe an emptiness there, or definitely remorse, for sure. We should be kind, compassion. So hopefully in that example, even before we've really gone into any kind of literary devices, just by annotating a poem like this in the exam, really does give you a starting block, because you can then start talking about all these different emotions that are within the poem. Yeah, the harsh reality, yeah, there's definitely a harshness, a physical harshness and a figurative harshness, isn't it? Yeah, it feels quite blunt, absolutely. Yeah, and Philip Larkin is known to be very blunt. And I would say that blunt message also, I think, is mirrored by the mower, the blades, where it says jammed up against the blades. I'd definitely say that's a deliberate thing. And also, if you get any just words that come into you when you're reading a poem like that, just put them on the page, don't lose them. Because also what happens is, when we go further on later into a more kind of sophisticated analysis, we lose all of this good stuff. And actually the bluntness of the blades mirrors the bluntness of his message. Existentialism, absolutely, yeah. He's saying any time for any form of life is important. Absolutely, exactly. And we're going to go on to that message, Meg, so hold on to that one for a bit later on. Yeah, excellent. So we're going to go back to our slides. So that's your step one. Are we back to my slides? I think so. Yes, we are, yeah. So that was your step one, just finding the emotions in the poem, which is your basic first step. And then two is how they express it. So what literary methods have they used? I don't know if anyone's come across these two acronyms before. Oh, Maria is saying reality of war. Yes, you're 2 steps ahead of me, Maria. That's in context, so we will come to that. That's step 3. And again, if this is in the exam, put that down on your page so you don't forget it. But I think it's good to do things in a particular order, so things don't get lost. But yes, you are right. So these acronyms are hopefully going to be really useful to you in an exam. So how do they express it? Literary methods, simile, metaphor, imagery, we're missing the M, language, and of course the effect. Whenever you're talking about any device, talk about the effect of it in the poem and the effect it has on you. Personification, onomatopoeia, sibilance, hyperbole, juxtaposition, alliteration, and meter. And hopefully in an exam, you're not just using these words as a sort of like a buzzword bingo, you are using them as part of your analysis. If there are any of these words that you don't understand, I'll send you later on after the session a list or a glossary of terms to use, so then you can fill out what they all mean. But they're a really good starting point. Now, when it comes to imagery, obviously imagery is so important for poetry because poetry is full of pictures. There's a Latin phrase, et pictura poestis, and if your Latin's better than mine, you'll have a better accent, but that just means poetry is like a picture. And look at this poem, this is by T.S. Eliot. Let us go then, you and I, when the evening is spread out against the sky, like a patient etherized upon a table. And a bit like the Larkin poem with the image of the blade, this again is a really brutal, really clear image, and what makes it so brilliant is the contrast. So let us go then, it's a romantic image, when the evening is spread out against the sky, and we think of the blue sky and maybe the green grass wherever they are. And then that's clashed with a patient etherized, which is under anesthetic, on an operating table, which is a horrible image. But what makes that such a brilliant few lines is the contrast. So look for any contrasts in a poem. This is also a great example of defamiliarization. And if you've not come across that word before, that means you make something familiar and new strange. So you kind of alienate it somehow, you deconstruct it, or in this example, you're making the scene, a romantic scene, unfamiliar. You defamiliarize it by bringing in the hospital table image. Also think about the sound of a poem. So rhyme, we find that very pleasing as creatures. We like it when sounds rhyme, so think of that effect. Consonants, that creates hard sounds, and assonance creates soft sounds. And that's always neglected, particularly at GCSE level. So if you're studying GCSE and you've got an anthology that you have to study, think about how the hard and soft sounds come together and create an effect, particularly the war poems there. Clusters as well create repetition, so don't forget to mention clusters, and rhythm that create a beat. Now, rhythm and repetition and rhyme, and even the sounds, that goes back to what we were saying about T.S. Eliot, who says that we don't need to understand a poem to enjoy it. We have to understand it if we're studying it. But think about the sounds and the effect it has on us in a musical sense as well. And don't ignore that, because it creates a visceral feeling. And by that, I mean it kind of gets to you on a bodily level, even before really intellectualizing with it. Here's an example of that. He clasps the crag with crooked hands, close to the sun in lonely lands. And I mean, that comes from a longer poem. We don't even have to understand it. We don't even need to know what a crag is. But just the sounds of the words, the clasp, the crag, the crooked hands, close to the sun in lonely lands. So the rhythm of the sentence, the sounds of the words that clash with each other and contrast with each other, we just find it pleasing. And so just as part of your analysis in an exam, don't forget the sound of the poem and the effect that it has on you as a reader. And if that is just a pleasant effect, talk about that. Talk about just unpleasant and pleasant effects that sounds have on you, because that might be emphasizing a meaning if it's a particularly pleasant poem, or it might contrast and clash with the meaning. It might sound nice, but there's a very sinister meaning underneath it. Structure is also really important, so the shape of the poem. Look at the shape of the poem, whether it's just one stanza, in couplets. The lines and the stanzas are what create the shape, and stanzas are the paragraphs in the poem. So remember to mention stanzas in your exam rather than paragraph. We're going to do another poem here, looking at the literary devices that we just talked about, and the emotions as well. So I'm going to go back to my iPad. And it might be easier to use the chat as well. So, about his person. Just while I'm doing this, have a read through of it. So even before we even look at the emotions, it's significant, the fact that it's in 2 lines repeated all the way down, and all starts with an A. So if this is in an exam, mention that. Make sure that you make a note to yourself that's significant as part of the structure and the meaning. So we're going to go through again, looking at emotions again. So just call out or use the chat function. So we've got expiry, firstly. So what connotations does that have? Loss, yeah. Death, exactly. Yes, you're getting the hang of this. End of time, ending, yeah. Something is ending, absolutely. A postcard stamped, unwritten, but franked. What emotions? Empty, yeah. A postcard stamped. Unwritten is empty. Yes, absolutely. Well done. Physically and mentally, definitely, yeah. Unfinished, good, yeah. Sorry about my handwriting, everyone. Unfulfilled, yeah. Loss of words, oh, I like that, absolutely, yeah. A pocket-sized diary slashed with a pencil. Slashed has connotations of what? Violence, absolutely. Authority, yeah, maybe, yeah. Yeah, definitely. Pain, ooh, this is good. Yeah, absolutely, Johnny. From March 24th to the 1st of April. So that's about a week from March 24th to 1st of April. Ominous, yeah, maybe, yeah. I think also in terms of seasons as well, I suppose that's just as the spring is approaching. We don't know if that's important yet, but we'll put it down anyway. A brace of keys for a mortise lock, an analog watch, self-winding, stopped. So a mortise lock is one of those big, heavy locks. Analog watch, memory, yeah. Time has stopped, yeah. Way down, secret, way down, yeah. Self-pity, yeah. Secrecy. Death, yeah, more death, definitely, absolutely. Back to death again. A final demand in his own hand. Final, back, more death. Yeah, in his own hand. A rolled up note of explanation, planted there like a spray carnation. Last words, yeah. Despair. Incongruous. Incongruous. Lou, can you explain what you mean by incongruous? What's incongruous about it? Are you there, Lou? Oh, hope versus death. Oh, okay, yeah. And carnations are a type of flower that are usually used in funerals. So there's a funereal kind of image there, so more death, funeral. But beheaded, more death. In his fist, new roots, a note from his partner, yeah, the death of a relationship rather than person. Oh, absolutely, yeah. Death or relationship. Beheaded is a shopping list. A giveaway photograph stashed in his wallet. A keepsake banked in the heart of a locket. So heart, always go to love with hearts and roses. Possessiveness, oh yes, definitely. Absolutely. Secrecy again, yeah. No gold or silver, but crowning one finger. Unrequited love, yeah. No gold or silver, that kind of alludes to poverty as well, perhaps. Marriage, yeah. Crowning one finger. Royalty. A ring of white, unweathered skin. That was everything. So the ring of white unweathered skin is the on his wedding finger. No gold or silver compared to the relationship. Absence of a wedding ring. Absolutely, yes, Rachel. It's it's the unweathered skin is where the ring has been on for a number of years and it's been taken off. So it's where the wedding ring used to be there. Exactly. Yes, Emma, you've got it. That was everything. What was everything? That was everything. His true self was missing in the marriage. Marriage changed him, possibly, yeah. Untanned skin, yeah, exactly, yeah, from the ring. So that was everything. So that is meaning the relationship. So now we've gone and done the first step, which is all of the emotions and the feelings, and where death keeps coming up, we've got a few instances of death, at least 4 there. Each time we refer to death, it refers to a different kind of death. Absolutely, yeah. It's like that phrase, death by 1,000 cuts. It's sort of like there's many reasons for this death, perhaps. The wedding ring was everything, or his free finger is. But yeah, maybe, yeah, it could be ambiguous. I think in this context, it probably is the relationship was everything to this person. And so the death is obviously the end of the relationship, but this is a literal death as well. I think we can look at this as a suicide. And so when we're looking at structure and sound and everything we mentioned, a crime scene, absolutely, yes, it's a crime scene, yeah. And then that goes back to the structure where it's very literal, you know, it's almost like a police report. The lack of ring could be enough to describe him. Yeah, exactly, it's sort of like that's all you need to know about this person is the fact that they don't have a relationship anymore. And that's the cause of death, really. And so this is like an autopsy report or a crime report from someone who's either found the body or they've taken the body in and they're going through his possessions. And that's why, in terms of the structure, is important because it's like a list. It's almost bullet points that A's act like, they function as a bullet point in a list because this is, you can almost imagine the coroner or the police or whoever, the authority going through this person's belongings and trying to piece together who this person is writing it down. So a wallet, a ring, some flowers, a note rolled up, and he's kind of holding this, which we presume is a suicide note, against his chest like a flower. The narrator has no attachment to the body. Absolutely, yes. So there is an emotional detachment there. So kind of putting the pieces together, you know, this is a crime report about his person. It's nameless, they're anonymous. They are literally going through his possessions to figure out who he is and why he's died. And we as the reader are piecing together what happened in his life to go so wrong, and it's the desperation of our winners, absolutely. But the reason we got to that, the reason we understand this poem is about a suicide as a result of a broken marriage, is because we've looked at the emotions, and we've looked at the structure, and we've looked at the sound. So we've looked at the brutality, we've looked at the reoccurrence of death and loss, and we've seen that the structure functions as a list. So I'm going to go back to my slides. So now we've done the 2-part. Half rhyme suggests something is unfinished. Ah, yes, Caitlin, absolutely, yes. And that's going back to our sound. Yeah, and that's his life is unfinished. He's deliberately cut it short, absolutely. So now we've done the first 2 parts. So what is the person feeling and how are they expressing it? Number 3 is why are they feeling it? This is really important. And this, again, gets left out in exams sometimes. So the first thing we can look at is practical criticism. And that's making sense of the words on the page. And that's what we've just done with those 2 poems, with the mower and about his person. We've gone through the words, we've seen what emotions they transmit, we've looked at the structure, and we try to make sense of it. And that's great. You can do that. The second way of seeing why the speaker is feeling something, why the poet has written this thing in the first place, is to look at the author intent and what the author wanted to achieve. And for that, you can look back at perhaps interviews with the author, you can read their diaries, you can find out more about their biography and their life, and you can have a biographical interpretation of a poem. I don't like this one, to be honest. There's a school of thought called the death of the author, and I love it because it's irrelevant. As far as I'm concerned, I think it's irrelevant what the author intended. So, for instance, the mower, if they intended it to be about war, for instance, which, it doesn't really matter. If you've got another completely valid interpretation, that's your right. I think in any artistic context, it's to some degree irrelevant what the author wants to transmit. The other really important thing is context. So that's historical, social, and political context of the poem. And for a clue of that, you can look at the date. So the Philip Larkin poem, that covers the Second World War of his life. So we can definitely start trying to make a parallel. Maybe it's an allegory for war, which it was. Social or political. So we can perhaps look at about his person and start thinking, well, obviously we feel sympathy for this person, but zooming out and looking at social context, could the poet be critiquing loneliness, perhaps? Could be critiquing mental health crisis in men or something? You know, are there any kind of social criticisms we can make? And if you're really stuck for this, particularly if you're at A level here, a really good acronym to learn is CRAGS. And this is when we talk about identity politics. So if you're trying to think of context, there's no date to give you a clue, and you want to go a bit further with your criticism, think of these as different lenses that you put on, different glasses that you wear. The first one is class, so you can see if there's any criticism about class going on in the poem, if it's about working class, if there's any dialogue going in there, is there any kind of message about some snobbery or injustice, which is really crucial. Race is the poem, again, if there's any particular sort of dialogue, or if there's any mention of duality, perhaps. A lot of poems in the anthology are about hybridity. So is again something to do about race and injustice. Age as well, and perhaps actually a bit about this person. Maybe we can look at that as a criticism about how society treats older people. And perhaps the despair of older people in their time of need, and perhaps the lack of support for older people. Not saying that's right, but it's one criticism and one interpretation. Someone says class and caste too. Absolutely, exactly. And sometimes class and race go absolutely hand in hand. You're completely right. And in the UK too, with class and race, often go hand in hand. So you don't have to, when you're looking at these as different lenses, you don't have to take one off and put one on. You can look through two lenses at the same time, or three even. Gender, really important. So this is where you can maybe have a feminist interpretation of a text. And again, even if the author didn't intend to have some sort of feminist interpretation, you can make one. That's your right. And that can make a really interesting analysis in the exam. And the last one is sexuality. And again, it might not be important, but it's something to look for, especially if you're in the exam, you're scrambling for an original interpretation of a poem. Just try that lens on. Is there anything about sexuality going on in that poem? And it might not just be about gay or lesbian relationships. It could be if it's a very sexually charged poem, so don't ignore that one as well. So class, race, age, gender, and sexuality should help you, almost like a Rubik's Cube, figure out what the context of the poem is in terms of the identity. So we're going to have a look at this poem now, looking at context. I can't remember who asked for this one, but it is a great poem. Who was the one who suggested this one? No one's... Rachel. Do you want to read it out, Rachel? You don't have to. Don't want to put it on the spot. Broken microphone, like his story. No, I believe you. No, don't worry, I'll read it out. I'm just going to share from my iPad. So if you go to Paul's iPad again. I'll try and make it a bit neater this time. So the more loving one, this is by Auden. Looking up at the stars, I know quite well that for all they care, I can go to hell. But on earth, indifference is the least we have to dread from man or beast. How should we like it were stars to burn with a passion for us we cannot return? If equal affection cannot be, let the more loving one be me. Admirer as I think I am of stars that do not give a damn. I cannot now, I see them say, I missed one terribly all day. Were all stars to disappear or die, I should learn to look at an empty sky and feel its total dark sublime, though this might take a little time. Now, we can do the practical criticism, as we were saying about the words on the page, and we can go through the loving, all the loving words and the very beautiful comparisons it makes about it being a love poem. But we'll take that as given. We can do that. Let's go on to context. And for that, we can look at the dates. So anyone have any ideas about context that might be relevant for this poem? Both wars. Maria, exactly. Do you want to come off mute and talk about that? Again, you don't have to.
Hello.
Hi, Maria.
Hi. You could just say like how there's like loads of mentions of hell, and you know the colloquialisms like damn and stuff like that. You could say maybe he doesn't want to fight in wars. It's very like romantic and sort of like maybe giving in at the end to the total darkness. Right,
absolutely, yes, yeah. I agree with you. I think it also can say that despite nature ignoring, or God, if you want to have a religious analogy, if God ignores you or nature ignores you, the fact that this person isn't cynical, they're not going to be too jaded by their experience. So whether that's they've lost, if it's unrequited love, and say their girlfriend or wife doesn't love them as much, or has lost a relationship, they're not going to be cynical and be too jaded by it. Or it could mean that they've gone through hell, as you say, it's really important. They've gone through hell and they don't want to be eaten up by that. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Yeah. Anything else on context? If it's not about just so much about war, any other context thoughts? Not just you, Maria, anybody? I mean, I think the war one might be, the most prevalent one. Now, how about crags? Can anyone think of, going through our crags, class, race, age, gender, sexuality? Imagine this is an exam and you think, right, I want to make one point, at least one paragraph, mentioning this sort of historical, social context. Can anyone think of anything?
If you go to the sexuality idea of it, it's stars to burn and passion for us we could not return. So like there's a lot of conflict with the LGBT community.
Oh, okay.
So I know that can refer to that, as it obviously wasn't allowed.
Right, yeah, sort of unrequited, love, absolutely, yeah. And that was called back actually when Auden was young, and this is that's a great point, by the way, because he might, and I'm sure he didn't write it to be a gay allegory, but it was called The Love That Cannot Speak Its Name. So you're absolutely right about the conflict, perhaps, about it being not being allowed, but still wanting to experience it, and perhaps somebody who knows full well they could be persecuted, prosecuted in that historical time to be gay. They can go to hell, they can go to prison, as Oscar Wilde did, but they will continue to love. I think that's a brilliant interpretation. Yeah, do you want to say any more about that, or does that cover it?
Yeah, just reinforcing the idea that, I don't know, and even you could link with the title, The More Loving Ones, that the love was stronger because it was forbidden or something. Like Romeo and Juliet, forbidden love is kind of, it was so strong because it was forbidden.
Absolutely, yes, that's excellent. Yeah, absolutely. Rachel, you say it could refer to class, loving someone higher than you and knowing you cannot love them. Yeah, maybe, yeah, exactly. And that goes back to that point about conflict and unrequited love. And I think it's a brilliant point to make that makes it more loving, the more loving type of love when it's forbidden, absolutely. And that Romeo and Juliet, when you parallel, that's exactly like this, isn't it? Not so much class conflict, but family conflict. There's a lot of negative and dark words: hell, beast, burn, damn, disappear, die. Absolutely. So Isabel, are you there? Naked stars as soldiers. Absolutely. Do you want to talk about that?
Well, it's sort of like, if you're looking at it in a historical sort of way, if you see the stars as soldiers and he's saying, I should learn to look at an empty sky, maybe he believes that whichever side he's on, the soldiers won't win. So the last sentence is, though this may take me a little time, he has to get used to the fact that he won't win.
Yeah, absolutely. Yes, definitely there's a sense of defeatism there,
Yeah.
isn't it? Yeah, or at least resigning to the reality. Absolutely, yeah. So, so what do you think he's resigning to then? What is he admitting?
I think he's admitting that maybe whatever the side he is on, maybe he believes that his side is in the wrong, and that what has happened shouldn't have happened, and they need to take responsibility that this is their problem and they shouldn't have done it, sort of thing.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and actually maybe this line here, how should we like it with stars to burn? Maybe that is, yeah, like a reality check, like, you know, we're going to blow all of ourselves up here. How you know, we might be causing our own downfall.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Yeah, well done. It could be religious. Rachel, yeah, stars representing God as the relationship cannot be consumed as one-sided. Oh, great, absolutely. This could be, yeah, a love letter to God, absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. And saying that, you know, I'll always love you more than you could possibly love me back, and that's okay. Georgia says, yeah, in relationships, sometimes there's one person who loves the other one more. Absolutely, that quite often happens. And he's saying, if that's going to be the case, let it be me. Maybe because actually, why do you think that is? Georgia, do you have a microphone? Can you speak? Or does anyone else have any ideas why he would want to be the more loving one? Because maybe you'd say, actually, I'd rather the other way round. So Rachel says he'd rather love more than not be able to return the love. It could make him feel more lonely. Oh yeah, possibly, yeah. So if you're in a relationship and perhaps you love the other person less, maybe there's a loneliness to that. Yeah, maybe, actually, yeah, it flips on. Safina, you said the suffragette movement and equality. Can you speak about that? No. Because there could be, potentially, a feminist interpretation of this, which is definitely not what Auden, I imagine, would have intended. But we can see the fact that the speaker, we can assume is he. I'm assuming it's he because perhaps of the language that's being used, like damn and hell. And so you can assume the speaker's male. And the fact that looking up at the night sky and admiring the stars is a traditional way to perhaps worship women, you know, put a woman on a pedestal, and on the surface, you know, that seems very, very romantic and lovely to say, you know, my wife is up here and I'm the more loving one, adoring my wife. There's a problem with that though, isn't there, in terms of gender equality? I would say. What does everyone else say? Do you have any burning feminists that have a problem with being put up on a pedestal by anybody? Shruti says they look the same if stars were women. Yeah, possibly. Yeah, but perhaps it's also a sense of objectifying, isn't it? Objectifying, but also the problem with when you put anybody on a pedestal, they can't go anywhere. And so I'd say a feminist interpretation of that idea of woman on a pedestal, yes, absolutely, Shruti, it's this misogynistic gaze, which he might not well be aware of, but like racism and misogyny, they're not usually aware they're a misogynist or a racist. So a woman is there for views, like a display, absolutely. And so when you put a woman or anybody on a pedestal, they can't go anywhere. It's why back along they put women in high heels, so they couldn't really go very far, very fast. And so by looking up at the stars, it's this beauty to be viewed and to be enjoyed. Actually, I don't know if that's so much of a compliment. You know, I'm sure this person might actually love him more if he recognized them as an equal, as a person who understood, appreciated, loved all the other qualities apart from being physically beautiful. Treating like a piece of art, not a person, Emma. Absolutely, I agree with that as well. Shreya says, shows that women have lost autonomy. Absolutely. And again, I don't think this is what Auden intended, but perhaps we can look at this in a historical context and say, even though this is intended as a very romantic poem, and on the surface it is, it's very beautiful and romantic, there are problems with it when we come to gender criticism and a feminist interpretation of it, for all the reasons we've just mentioned. And so if this was in the exam, that hopefully gives you an idea of how to add context and identity politics so you can have another level of analysis to the poem. So I think we're almost done. I'm just going to go back to sharing my screen again on my laptop so you can see the final couple of slides. We didn't quite have time for Brothers, but that's another lovely poem. But what I will do is, on the website, Pass My English, I'll send you all a link. I'll send some resources as well, things like the glossary of terms. I'll send a full list of emotions that might be quite useful. And I'll put some other unseen poems up there so that you can do the same thing that we've just done now. So you can go and do those 3 questions. So what does the speaker feel? How do they express it? And why do they express it? And again, it's that third one that often gets missed out in the exam. So if you can practice these unseen poems, thinking about your crags, thinking about practical criticism, as well as the historical social context as well. Georgia, yes, you all seem to get it anyway. You all seem to have cracked it, so that's good. I hope you've learned some new techniques when you're analysing a poem. If you would like, send me a poem that you don't understand or you're working on, and if you get stuck, then just email me and I'll try and give you a couple of pointers. But thank you all so much for joining. I hope you've enjoyed it. I've enjoyed it. And if you're getting results over the summer, I wish you every bit of good luck. I'm going to be doing a couple more classes as well. If you've got any suggestions for classes, let me know. I've got some free time, so I'm happy to do any. I've got another one tomorrow on essay, how to write an essay masterclass. So if you're not already signed up to that, come along. That's also free. It'd be lovely to see you there. So, thank you everyone, and enjoy the rest of your afternoon. Oh, someone says, what's my email? It's paul@passmyenglish.com. Great. Thank you everyone. Bye.